Here we are once again in our bedroom studio, coming to you from Sunset Beach. So, we've had another discussion about the Supreme Court justices. We may not make a lot of friends on this one.
Well, we'll find. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not after making friends, so that's okay. Actually, a lot of people say that that's the fact that the next president will appoint at least one Supreme Court justice and maybe as many as
Four.
four. Means that the reach of this next election will go far beyond the 4-year term. Could go for decades. So. I guess we need to talk about the difference in approach. There's really a difference in approach that's been pretty consistent between Republicans and Democrats for decades. And the terms used are constructionist, or what was the other?
Originalism.
Originalism, which tends to be a Republican view or approach to the Constitution and to appointing Supreme Court justices. And the other is judicial activism, which is represented by the Democrats. So to describe those two, for those that don't know, a constructionist or originalist says, what does the Constitution say? What does it mean? And what was the intent of the people that wrote it? And if you listen to our thing on gun control, we talked about that, and that today we're dealing with things that weren't part of the original intent when we're talking about gun control. Judicial activism says, also on that is the Constitution has a way to change it. So if it doesn't say it, and you would like to have it say it, well, then you amend it and you make it say something different. We've had a number of amendments that have happened, even some in my lifetime, that have changed things like the voting age and various things. So constructionists would say that's the way to do it. You change what it says rather than just interpret it differently. Judicial activists would say, well, any case that comes to us, no matter what it's about, it could be about something that the Constitution doesn't address directly, but we will try to look for some hints or clues within that, and then we will extrapolate from that and come up with a ruling. And we see that in a number of cases, and a lot of things that we look at, you hear in the media now as rights. Yeah, these are rights that aren't in the Bill of Rights. They're really not in the Constitution. People may say, well, there's some hints to them, and there are some hints to them. But they would be things like, well, the big one that got all the attention because of the way the decision was made was Roe versus Wade and abortion rights. There's nothing in the Constitution talks about abortion, nothing at all. But the Supreme Court, being an activist court, decided that they would look at some small hints. They called them a penumbra. That's a secondary shadow, just a hint. And from that, they legalized abortion, and they actually basically passed a law. Said states can't do any laws to regulate abortion in the first 3 months. They can regulate it some in the second 3 months, and they can outlaw it altogether in the last 3 months. Of course, a lot of decisions have happened since then that change all that. But there's nothing in the Constitution about trimesters or anything. All of that is purely judicial activism that was made up by the Supreme Court, as have been a lot of other things, our right to privacy, reproductive rights, the stuff we're talking about now of right to equal pay. People will say, well, we have a right to good nutrition, or you have a right to free college, or you have a right to all of these things. Those rights are not in the Constitution. They're not in the Bill of Rights. Those are new rights that we say we should have, and then the Supreme Court should interpret things in ways that give us these rights. So that's the approach that would be the Democrats and Hillary's viewpoint. Donald Trump and the Republicans would take the other approach. You have to also understand the 10th Amendment, which most people don't pay any attention to, is the closing of the Bill of Rights, the first 10 amendments. And what it specifically said was, if the Constitution doesn't give this power to the federal government, then that power remains with the states and with the individual. So when the government is starting to do things that they're regulating, individual behavior, and it's not in the Constitution, the Constitution actually says they don't have the right to do that, and we shouldn't allow them to do that. So those are things to consider when you're looking at presidential candidates and what they will do as far as the Supreme Court. Donald Trump actually has produced a list of people that he would look at proposing. Hillary has not. So you can look at his list. You can't look at hers. And that's it on the Supreme Court. See you next time.
Good night.
Good night.